They say the desert remembers every scream, even centuries after the bodies that made them have turned to dust. And on this night, this impossible, breathless, moon-starved night, you stand on the crest of a ridge, staring down into a valley that glows like the underbelly of a great sleeping beast. The wind scrapes at your cloak. Sand hisses across your boots like serpents fleeing something they sense before you do. You expect silence. This is the kind of place where silence should rule. A barren landscape of bone-colored dunes, ancient rock, and air so dry it burns your lungs. But the world is not quiet. Not tonight. You feel the first vibration under your feet. A faint tremor. A low shudder rolling through the ground as if a buried titan is shifting beneath the earth. Then the sound comes. The distant, rhythmic thunder of hooves. Not many. Not an army. Just a few hundred. Their intensity carries a strange certainty, as if each approaching heartbeat belongs to a man who has already accepted death. The valley below is alive with fire. Torches bloom like molten stars across the black canvas of night, illuminating the sprawling camp of Saladin's 26,000. You see tents arranged in neat clusters, long lines of horses tethered and sleeping, silhouettes of soldiers resting beside embers. Standards flicker lazily in the warm updrafts. A colossal living organism, breathing, pulsing, dreaming of conquest. And then there is you, standing beside men who look impossibly small against that ocean of flames. 500 knights, armor gleaming faintly beneath the thin moonlight. You expect fear, the kind that crushes the breath from your lungs. You expect trembling lips, whispered prayers, shivers of doubt. Instead, you hear laughter. Not loud laughter, not drunken, something quieter, darker. A brittle amusement shared among men who have made peace with fate. They tap their shields with slow, deliberate rhythm. The cold wind carries their breath in white puffs. Their horses paw at the ground, sensing what is coming. The desert presses in around you as if holding its breath. You turn, and that is when you see him. A young figure astride a white horse, posture rigid, breath uneven. His face is hidden behind a silver mask that glints like the surface of a frozen lake. His hands tremble as he holds the reins, but he does not hide it. He cannot. Linen bandages peek from beneath his armor. The wind carries a faint, bitter scent of oil and medicinals. Baldwin IV, King of Jerusalem, 16, dying, unbroken. He raises one shaking hand, and the murmurs vanish instantly. 500 knights fall silent. Even the horses quiet. The desert feels suddenly fragile, as though the whole world is listening for what he will do next. His eyes burn beneath the mask, two sparks of fire glowing in a ruined body. His breath rattles softly. When he speaks, his voice is thin but unwavering. "They think we are weak," he says. "They think I am already dead. Let them learn otherwise." You expect him to wait until dawn. You expect strategy, caution. You expect a king who preserves what little strength he has. But Baldwin draws his sword, points it toward the valley of sleeping giants, and the impossible begins. 500 knights surge forward now, straight into the jaws of 26,000. And as you race down the hillside with them, hooves exploding against packed sand, wind tearing tears from your eyes, the night becomes a screaming, blazing, living thing. The desert remembers this. The desert never forgot. You have just witnessed the moment everything changed, without yet understanding how the world ever got here. This wasn't madness. It wasn't blind courage. It wasn't the foolishness of a dying king. It was strategy, more chilling and calculated than any chronicler dared write. A boy whose flesh was rotting had become a ruler whose mind sharpened into steel. A king who should have been pitted became a weapon the world could neither predict nor control. Baldwin was dying, yes, but dying men are sometimes the most terrifying of all, because what do they fear? What can be taken from them that is not already slipping away? This is not the story of numbers or armies. It is the story of will. A story of a boy who used a death sentence to forge himself into a figure Saladin, the greatest commander of his age, would never fully understand. But this story did not begin on the ridge. It began in the chambers of a palace where a child learned that the world feared him long before any enemy drew a sword. Before Baldwin was the masked king who led impossible charges into the night. He was simply a quiet boy wandering palace courtyards under the heavy gold sunlight of Jerusalem. Tutors praised his intelligence. Servants admired his gentleness. But beneath the surface, whispers followed him. He didn't react to pain, the kind of pain that would make any child cry out. Cuts, burns, scrapes, nothing. His face remained calm, eyes curious, as if pain was a language he was never taught to understand. What others saw as divine blessing, a few saw as something far more sinister. A physician examined him once, under the guise of concern for his health. The man's expression shifted from curiosity to dread. Pale patches on the prince's arm, numbness, insensitivity to injury. A forbidden word formed behind the doctor's eyes. Leprosy. If the kingdom knew, Baldwin would be hidden away, locked in chambers, cut from succession. His life would end long before his body did. So the truth was buried beneath ointments, gloves, whispered reassurances. His childhood became a secret shared among too many anxious adults. But secrets leak. The first betrayal came from boys his own age, bright-eyed, cruel in the way children can be. They noticed he didn't wince when pushed, that he didn't bleed the same way. They poked, prodded, then whispered, then laughed. The second betrayal came from pity, the way people looked at him not with anger or ridicule, but sorrow. A sorrow deeper than any child should ever provoke. Then came the worst betrayal, one he was never meant to hear. Two nobles murmuring outside a courtyard arch. A sick boy cannot rule Jerusalem. Better he not survive long enough to try. Those words did not break him. They transformed him. A child with no pain became a prince who learned to hide his wounds from the world, who studied not only the sword, but the nature of power. He devoured stories of kings, cruel, brilliant, doomed, triumphant. He learned the patterns of rising and falling states. He watched generals train soldiers with an intensity far beyond his years. He understood early that survival depended not on strength, but on perception. The world must believe he was capable, untouchable, destined, even if his body disagreed. The breaking point came when he was 13. The word leper was spoken in the throne hall like a dropped blade. A political rival let it slip deliberately, a venomous act disguised as accident. Gasps filled the chamber. Servants froze. Nobles recoiled. The entire world of the boy prince shattered in a single heartbeat. He watched their eyes change, some filled with fear, others with triumph, most with resignation. In their minds, Baldwin was no longer heir to a kingdom. He was a fragile burden, a future crisis, a corpse with a crown already waiting. That night, Baldwin stood before a mirror, lifted his gloves, and looked at the pale, patchy skin, the numb fingers, the inevitable truth. He did not cry. He whispered to his reflection, "If I cannot outrun death, I will master it." And from that moment on, Baldwin didn't merely train for power. He prepared for it, with a determination so cold and absolute that even seasoned warriors grew uneasy in his presence. Pain would never guide him, fear would never shape him, and weakness would never be visible again. His rise to power was not a gentle ascent. It was a storm breaking across the land. The noble who had exposed him publicly found himself stripped of lands, titles, and influence. Not killed, but humiliated so thoroughly that every ambitious rival took the warning. When raiders threatened the borderlands, his advisors insisted he remain in the palace. His physicians begged him not to ride. Baldwin ignored them all, barely 16, half-blind in one eye, his limbs stiffening. He led the charge personally and crushed the raiders so decisively that stories spread across the region. The Leper King does not retreat. He outplayed political factions twice his age, refused regencies, denied councils the chance to control him, issued decrees with crisp, frightening clarity. And then his first public appearance as king, not as a sick boy, not as a fragile ruler. He rode into Jerusalem wearing full armor, gold-trimmed cloak, and a silver mask hiding the ravages beneath. The crowd fell into stunned silence. Was he divine? Cursed? Protected by God? Touched by death? The ambiguity became power. A king who could not be touched. A king who did not feel pain. A king whose illness became a symbol rather than a weakness. He eliminated his first major rival not with assassination, but with strategy, sending him to command a distant, doomed campaign. The man never returned. Baldwin said nothing. He didn't need to. By 17, Baldwin was a myth walking on two deteriorating legs. And Saladin began to notice. What made Baldwin truly terrifying, however, was not his illness. It was how he weaponized it. He crafted a signature method that defied every rule of war. Appear weak. Strike where no sane commander would. Move when the enemy sleeps. Attack when retreat is expected. Turn despair into unpredictability. His knights trained to become a single cohesive mass. Compact, silent, deadly. Horses bred and conditioned for night assaults. Armor darkened to swallow moonlight. Blades sharpened for close combat, where chaos favored skill over numbers. Symbolically, Baldwin transformed himself into a specter. The masked king, the untouchable monarch, the commander who defied illness and logic alike. Psychologically, he disrupted Saladin's greatest strength: patience. Saladin was a master of gradual pressure. Baldwin shattered tempo, ignored patterns, behaved like a man with no fear of death. Saladin understood many opponents. He did not understand a king who led charges with a body half consumed by decay. The unpredictability was the strategy. The disease was the disguise. The myth was the weapon. Saladin marched with 26,000 men, not because he feared Baldwin, but because he didn't. Baldwin's kingdom was fracturing. Food supplies dwindled, nobles squabbled, allies faltered. Saladin burned farms, destroyed villages, cut roads, surrounded the land like a tightening fist. Everyone expected Baldwin to retreat to Jerusalem's walls and pray for mercy. Instead, he gathered 500 knights, the finest, the most loyal, the ones who believed in him not because he was strong, but because he refused to die. They rode out not to defend a city, but to strike at an empire. And that is how, on a moon-starved night, you found yourself above Saladin's camp, where the fires of a sleeping army flickered like a field of restless spirits. Now the moment returns, your heart pounding, hooves drumming, the night shrinking around you as Baldwin lowers his sword and 500 men plunge into the sea of 26,000. The first impact is thunder. Knights crash through canvas and bone. Swords rise and fall in brutal arcs. Tents collapse under the shock of war. Horses scream. Men stumble awake into death. Fires burst into larger flames as embers scatter. This is not a battle. It is a catastrophe unfolding in the dark. The tight formation of knights cleaves through Saladin's sleeping camp like a blade cutting cloth. Officers die before they can shout orders. Panic spreads like wildfire. Archers scramble without arrows. Horses bolt in terror. Commanders lose sight of everything. To them, it is not 500. It is thousands. An entire army emerging from the night. Saladin's soldiers scatter. Trip. Fall. Flee. The desert becomes a maze of collapsing fabric, overturned braziers, trampling feet, and dying torches. The knights move like shadows, striking centers of command, sowing confusion, then disappearing into the darkness before counterattacks can organize. Baldwin rides at the front, not behind, not protected. His mask glows in the firelight, turning him into a specter. His damaged body trembles with every impact, but his will forces it forward. By dawn, Saladin is gone, retreated, stunned, shattered not by numbers, but by audacity. The valley falls silent. The desert breathes again. You survived something impossible. You witnessed a legend forged in real time. But even the strongest cannot defeat the slow, relentless betrayal happening inside Baldwin's body. Fingers stiffened, eyes dimmed, legs weakened. Pain returned. Not normal pain, but a deep, gnawing ache that lived in bones and nerves. The disease that spared him pain as a boy returned as torture in adolescence. Allies began preparing for life without him. Nobles whispered, rivals circled. Foreign powers waited for the inevitable collapse of a kingdom held together by a dying boy. Baldwin trusted the wrong people, relied on advisors who planned not for his vision but for their own futures. Plots tangled, politics strangled stability. He fought as long as he could, long after any other man would have surrendered to illness. But no strength of will can stop the body from failing entirely. When Baldwin died, the kingdom unraveled with chilling speed, not because he failed, because no one could replace him. He was gone. And the world he held together with sheer force of will dissolved like sand slipping through fingers. History remembers Baldwin merely as the Leper King, a tragic figure, a doomed boy, a ruler trapped in a decaying body. But the truth is far more unsettling. He was a strategist who terrified Saladin, a king whose courage eclipsed his suffering, a commander who defied illness, fear, reason, and fate itself. His disease was not his weakness. It was his disguise, his weapon, his legend. The real horror was never Baldwin's leprosy. It was what his life revealed about humanity, that the most dangerous leader is not the strongest, not the healthiest, not the richest. It is the one who has already made peace with death, the one who fears nothing because everything painful has already happened, the one whose will outlives their flesh. History remembers Baldwin as a dying king. But the truth is this. On the night 500 knights shattered 26,000 soldiers, the world learned that sometimes the weakest body carries the strongest soul. Sometimes the dying king rides hardest. And sometimes the desert remembers a scream not because of how men died, but because of who led them.